Hey there, hope you're doing good. Today we'll talk about the downsides of blockchain or cryptocurrency. Every technology has pros and cons. I'm recording this video on an iPad. It has its pros and cons as compared to recording on a computer. For example, the microphone is better, which is why I chose it. Similarly, Bitcoin or crypto as a tech has its pros and cons. The pros have been widely considered and understood. I feel not enough recognition is being given to the cons. So that's what I want to talk about today. I am not saying that this technology is useless. I'm just saying it has its pros, it has its cons. You need to understand both before you make a decision. In this video, I'll talk about the entire space of blockchain and crypto together. Some of my points will apply to both, some only to blockchain and some only to crypto. One argument in favor of blockchain is that it enables decentralized apps to be built. For example, you could have a social network that's not controlled by Twitter. Some people don't like the control they have. For example, they blocked one of Indian news sources called Vion for allegedly supporting Russia when all they did was share something that was also reported on US networks like CNN, which were not blocked. So these rules are arbitrary, ever changing, and there's an element of political correctness, there's an element of. So I think on Twitter someone asked someone else whether he's a man or a woman, and then they blocked the person asking the question for something to do with US style political correctness, and there's the issue of nation sovereignty. So there are all these issues with centralized platforms. They can ban you for no reason at all. So there are all these issues, which is a fair point. So what do we do about them? Some people say we can build a decentralized network, which is not controlled by a central party. Which sounds good, but you don't need blockchain for that. Oops. There is this thing that has existed for years called microblog, which is an open source platform like Twitter. It has timelines, mentions, bookmarks, everything that you would expect, right? And it's also open source. So you can download the software and run it on your own server. You can have your own version of microblog. It's like an installation of WordPress. And no one but you can decide who gets blocked on your server. So you don't need blockchain to deliver some of the advantages of decentralized platforms. It has been possible for 20 years to build it. So that is not an advantage of blockchain. Like if someone is saying use blockchain because you can do this, no, you can do it without blockchain as well. Decentralization is a mantra in these communities, but people want centralization. For example, I am distributing this video on YouTube, right? And Google is known to ban people randomly and delete their accounts and etc. etc. Right? I can't link to my consulting website at the end of the video according to Google's policies because I don't have 1,000 subscribers yet. I think that's like an unreasonable policy because there are all these guys who are peddling misinformation and clickbait and spam and all these things, and they get 1,000 subscribers, right? Whereas honest people are penalized. So there is definitely a downside to a centralized network. Now I could run my own video server to share this video instead of YouTube, but do I want to? Of course not. Because it has its own cons, cost, administration, distribution. People are on YouTube, people are not on my server. Right? The reason people use centralized organizations is that they consider the pros to outweigh the cons. It is not for lack of technology. Often crypto enthusiasts are blind to that. And that's the thing with enthusiasts on any topic, be it enthusiasts for organic food or living off the grid or whatever cause you name, they are so into it that they don't realize that most people are not like them. And this is the case for early adopters of any technology. The people who adopted tech in the 1970s or 80s, computers, they were very forward looking. Like my uncle, a chartered accountant who bought his first IBM PC in like mid 80s, mid to late. So the early adopters often are willing to put up with a lot of pain. They are really motivated, they're really passionate about things, they're willing to put up with pain in exchange for certain benefits, which most people aren't. Most people don't want decentralization. So going around beating the drum saying decentralization is good is missing the point. It's like the open source enthusiasts. You have idiots like Richard Stallman who will lecture you if you use any proprietary software. That's not helping at all. You need to understand people's needs and meet them, not lecture them. Actually, I would say decentralization in many cases is good. Let's take an example. Someone proposed a service like Uber built on the blockchain. But I would consider that to be worse than today's Uber because a driver, I mean, when I say Uber, I don't mean Uber, I mean a ride sharing network. Let's not take Uber as an example because they're not doing a good job with their service. If I start a ride sharing network tomorrow, it will be centralized because I can ban bad drivers. In a decentralized thing, they can't be banned, right? Because everyone is in, there is no central authority who can unanimously take these decisions. That's the whole point of decentralization. So often you want some central authority to take care of you. In fact, if you leave aside tech and think generally, why do we have authorities in society? A policeman is an authority, right? A person running an airport is an authority. Why do we have authorities in life? Because the pros of having an authority outweigh the cons. They give us something useful. As Paul Graham said, you can't criticize the police saying that, oh, look, police are committing all these atrocities. They are committing atrocities, all the more so in India than probably the US. But it's not police or freedom. Should we have freedom instead of police? No. If you get rid of the police, you'll have gangs. So the question is, do you want to be ruled by the police or do you want to be ruled by gangs? So this is an example of an authority, police, which is corrupt, but which is still net good to society. If I could press a button and make all the policemen disappear, I wouldn't press that button. Similarly, any kind of authority, it has its value. And decentralization fans advocate getting rid of the authorities without recognizing the value they add. The other argument against an authority is that we may not trust an authority. But again, most of the time we do. If I'm transferring money from my bank account to yours, technically the RBI is involved. The RBI can steal my money. They operate the payment systems like IMPS, well, Payments Corporation of India, but whatever, right? The same setup. These guys can steal my money, but am I worried about that? No, I am not. The RBI has never stolen my money and they won't, or misplace it, or, they won't do such things. So saying that, oh, authorities are not trustworthy, so let's have decentralization is a non-starter of an argument. Moving on, cryptocurrencies have high transaction costs, which is more than $1 for Bitcoin. See, it's $1.4, which is very high, like 100 rupees. If I go to the supermarket and buy something for less than 100 rupees, the transaction cost is more than the cost of the item. It'll probably be viable to pay whatever 100 rupees as a transaction cost only if the amount I am buying is like, I don't know, 5,000 rupees or more, which doesn't work for most transactions. So if you take the credit card fee of, I don't know what it is, 2% or 3%, and I spend 5,000, then it works out to be same as Bitcoin. So if I'm spending above 5,000, yes, technically speaking, I would save money, but otherwise most of the time I won't. Bitcoin has low scalability. You can see how many of the networks have different scalability, but the highest of all of them, see this one, quick swap, let's start one by one. Ethereum supports only 9 transactions per second. Celo, whatever that is, supports 25. Polygon supports 48. Avalanche supports 32. This Binance Smart Chain supports 200. Okay, Solana is little better. It's the best at 300. But this is a fraction of how many credit card transactions happen per second. It's orders of magnitude off. So the hype doesn't justify this. These are fine for some specific uses or as a niche. It's like getting excited about submarines. Submarines are useful only for the military. They are a niche. You and I are not going to travel by submarine to the office tomorrow. I'm not saying submarines are useless, they have their use, but we should get excited about submarines. Similarly, a thing that supports only 300 transactions per second is a toy. Then there's a latency. Bitcoin has a latency of 10 minutes. Ethereum has a latency of 13 seconds. But even that's slower than IMPS or Google Pay or swiping a credit card. If you have a supermarket counter and each customer is delayed by 13 seconds, the queue will back up. Then we have had repeated hacks of these networks. There's also the high environmental cost. Blockchain or crypto already consumes more energy than Argentina, the entire country. A single Bitcoin transaction consumes enough energy to power an average US household for 60 days, 2 months. And that's a US household which uses a lot more energy than other developed countries, let alone developing countries. This is a complete waste of resources. It's like using a 747 to transport a single tissue paper from China to Bangalore. We cannot destroy the planet. Moving on, there's limited interoperability between different chains and you have fragmentation. To fix that, you have bridges, but the bridges have been prone to hacks. Another advantage of crypto, specifically Ethereum, is touted to be smart contracts, which are contracts that are governed by code rather than English terms. Traditionally in a contract, both sides negotiate, they put some terms on a piece of paper and sign it, right? Instead of English, a smart contract is governed by code. So it enforces itself. In theory. In practice, it can't because most contracts reference the real world. I work as a consultant, and if I sign a contract with you to provide consulting services, and you claim I didn't provide those services, a smart contract can't help you with that. How does it know whether I did or didn't provide? Or, as an even simpler example, if I sign a contract with you to deliver 100 kgs of rice, and you claim I delivered maize instead of rice, the smart contract is useless. It can't open the bag and look at it. Most contracts are like this. They reference something that happens in the real world. So which is why they can't be self-governing, self-enforcing. Moving on. Sometimes crypto enthusiasts talk about decentralized autonomous organizations. Basically, this is a organization without a CEO, alright? Because traditionally in an organization, the CEO is the ultimate boss. He can do whatever he wants. I mean, sure, the board of directors can replace the CEO, but finally there's a central authority, whether it's the CEO or the board. And everyone below these people have limited authority. The minute you disagree with the CEO or the board, that's it. It's game over for you, right? Now, a DAO is supposed to be better than that. But you can do this even today. Nothing prevents you from having bylaws that state that you'll have a vote and you'll do things as per the vote. Or you can even distribute shares to people, to each member of the company, and they can vote proportional to the number of shares they have. And whoever wins the vote will decide the operation of the company, what the company will do. So you can do that with traditional technology like shares in a company. Again, this is a case of old wine in a new bottle. There's a supposed problem. First of all, let's take a step back. Why aren't most organizations decentralized? Because it doesn't work. You need a single leader. Otherwise, you'll get into debates, you'll try to reach consensus, people won't agree. You will never be able to make bold or risky decisions because someone or the other will say no. And often, if you have two good ideas and you strike a compromise between the two, you'll end up with a bad idea. So that is why organizations cannot be decentralized. Society itself is decentralized because there are multiple organizations, multiple companies making products. But each company can and should be run like in a centralized manner. And if they don't deliver a good product, people won't buy their product, right? So society already takes care of that. You don't need a second level of decentralization. When Steve Jobs was asked about the iPad and not having some feature or the other, he explained. When he was asked again, he said, look, we are making the best product we can. If we make a good product, people will buy it. Otherwise, they won't. So that should be the model. Each company should try to make the best it can in a centralized manner. But having said that, even if you do want a decentralized organization, you don't need to use crypto technology for that. Moving on, there was a famous decentralized organization called the DAO. Like it's both the name of the technology and the name of the organization that used this technology. And they had these contracts, right? And it turned out that the code enforcing them had a bug. So someone stole whatever it may be, hundreds of millions of dollars. $50 million, sorry. They had something involving recursive calls. So $50 million, right? Now, the contracts said that the code is the final arbiter, right? It said whatever we mention in this contract is just an explanation. The code which is located here, and this is the checksum of the code, is what defines the contract. But what happens when there's a bug? Then both people, so typically in a traditional contract, when there's a dispute, there are different interpretations of the contract. So if you take an example of a consulting contract, for example, if you take an example of a termination clause, if there are no termination terms mentioned, then people can argue about it. What is the expected way of terminating a consulting contract? But a good contract always has a termination clause, right? It can say any side can terminate this engagement without advance notice or with 30 days notice or whatever it may be. And what are the fees to be paid and all that, right? So if you don't specify this, you can have a dispute later on. The other situation in which you can have a dispute is when the contract is ambiguous. For example, when I was running a consulting company earlier, one of my clients signed a contract to have an engineer work with him exclusively for a month. And one of the days was a holiday. But for some companies, this company was running, my client's company. And he said, look, my engineers are working So I expect your engineer to work with me because he's working as part of a team. It's not that I've given a project to your company to execute as a black box. He's sitting here, he's working with our team, so he should work. So the contract didn't say that he should work in that case. It didn't say that he shouldn't work in that case. So it was ambiguous. So that is the second reason why you can have a dispute. First reason is something is not specified. Second reason is something is ambiguous. When you say he'll work for a month, like what does that mean? So typically when a contract leads to a dispute, there are differing interpretations is what I have been trying to say. But with a smart contract, both sides could agree on something, but the code could be something else. So now you have three parties in the dispute, which makes it worse. And what's going to happen here? If you go to court, the judge will throw it out. A contract requires, the judge is not going to say, okay, this is what you signed, so deal with it. You got what you signed. No, he's not going to say that. Intentions matter in contracts. And a contract requires a meeting of the minds, which is to say both people should understand what they're agreeing to. Otherwise, a contract is legally invalid. Doesn't matter what the code says. If people don't understand it, it's not invalid. It's not valid. And the other thing is, traditionally, the courts have jurisdiction. Crypto enthusiasts say that the code has jurisdiction. Actually, it doesn't. You can say whatever you want, but when there's a dispute, one side will take the other side to court. Then try telling the judge that he has no jurisdiction and see what will happen to you. Right? It's not going to work out. The other problem with crypto is that, especially Bitcoin, it's a bad community full of scammers. It has even led to death threats in the Bitcoin community. Moving on, Bitcoin is volatile. Its price fell by 49%. It was, let's make it dollars. 16, almost $70,000 to $40,000. Oh, the trough was 35, so it's almost 49%. You can see, right? 70 to 35. And if you think this is a one-time thing, it's not. It has had another collapse. See, this is the collapse we looked at. This one. But it collapsed earlier as well, from 59, let's say $60,000 to $29,000 here, which is again 50%. And if you think it affects only Bitcoin, Ethereum is also affected. That also fell 48%. This makes it a bad financial tool. It can't be volatile. Anything in finance should be one of three things: a store of value, a medium of exchange, or an investment. Let's explore what these mean. A store of value is you have worked hard, you have earned some money, now you want to store it in some form for the future. You could put banknotes in your cupboard. You could put the money in a bank. You can have a fixed deposit. You can have a liquid fund. You can invest in gold. You can invest in real estate, as we traditionally did, to pass it on to the next generation or whatever it may be, right? So that's a store of value. It is something valuable that you are storing. Bananas are not a good store of value because they'll rot. As a store of value, you don't want your assets to suddenly be worth 49% of what they are. So it doesn't cut it. Crypto doesn't cut it as a store of value. If not a store of value, the other is a medium of exchange, which is when you go to the supermarket and buy something, what do you pay? Is crypto suitable for that? No. It has high costs, high transaction fee, High environmental costs. So if you're buying a house, that's a one-time thing. Even if the environmental cost is high, that's okay. But transactions you do all day. So you can't have high environmental cost or high latency or low throughput. And also, if you go to the supermarket and find a product marked at 1 Bitcoin and tomorrow the price of Bitcoin doubles, do you want to pay double the money for the same value? So for the same product? No, you don't. Which means they'll need to keep readjusting the price. Which means people won't know how much it is worth. For example, if a packet of potato chips is 10 rupees, I have a rough mental model, a small packet of potato chips. If it keeps fluctuating, we can't even remember what the fair value should be. So basically, a medium of exchange should be stable. If you go to buy potatoes, you buy 1 kg of potatoes, but someone redefined the kilogram to mean double of what it was. You can't transact that way, right? You'll get double the potatoes that you want, and half of them will go waste. And the seller will have a loss because he's giving you double the potatoes for the same price. You can't have the definition of the kilogram change or the currency like rupee or Bitcoin. So if crypto is not a store of value, it's not a medium of exchange, could it be an investment? No, because investments have to have an underlying value. They have to have something that generates money. So if you invest money in a company and they set up solar panels, let's say, and these generate electricity which is sold, that is how you earn a profit. An investment should give you a profit. And how do you generate a profit? By performing some economic activity. It could be running a factory, could be running an airport, whatever it may be. Something that people are paying you for. Crypto is not, right? Like if you buy Bitcoin, it's not put to any kind of productive use, the money that you have quote unquote invested. So it's a bad investment. It's a speculation. An investment without an underlying economic activity that generates value, generates profit, is a speculation, and you shouldn't speculate. So if it is not a store of value, it's not a medium of exchange, and it's not an investment, what is it good for? Nothing. Or it's good for specific cases. For example, international transfers can be done by Bitcoin. Okay, great. That may cost less. Fine. But you have solutions like TransferWise. And what TransferWise does is, if someone in the US is paying someone in India, instead of doing an international transaction, they do a local transaction in the US. They receive the money into their own bank account in the US. And the minute they do that, TransferWise's bank account in India will credit the money to your bank account in India via an NEFT transfer or IMPS or RTGS. So that way, you're avoiding the high cost of an international transaction. I have had banks steal as much as $100 when doing international transactions. I have received a check for $1,000, and when I deposited it, I got only $900. Apparently, there's an intermediary bank or forwarding bank or something they call it, which has come in the middle and stolen the money. Like that shouldn't even be legal, right? If I get a check for $100, I should get $100. But anyway, so these are the problems with international transactions, and they take multiple days and all that. So you can solve that by Bitcoin, or you can solve that by TransferWise, which is a simpler solution. And what TransferWise does, they do bulk transactions. So suppose in this example, if you have more people sending money from the US to India than the other way around, a lot of money will accumulate in the US account, and the Indian account will run low because they're paying out. They'll periodically do a bulk transfer of millions of dollars, and they'll get much better prices that way. And even if that transaction takes a few days, it's not a problem because it is not your money that's getting held up. So my point is, if Bitcoin allows better international transactions, you don't need Bitcoin for that. There's a much simpler solution, which is TransferWise. So why do you want to build all this advanced, risky, unproven technology to do something that can be done trivially? Again, all of these deficiencies don't mean that crypto or blockchain is useless. It has some use, but the hype is in excess of the real value, which is why I made this video. And Gartner has a hype cycle. What they talk about is when there is some technology that has been built, there is lot of hype about it. This is where crypto has been for the past few years and now, and even today. And then over time, people realize that they have been oversold, it's overhyped. And then the hype decreases. And then people are disillusioned. This is when this is when all the stupid journalists will write that Bitcoin is the future. This is when all the stupid journalists will write Bitcoin is dead. Or wires interfaces or whatever the hyped technology is. And then people understand that people are finally enlightened. They understand that technology has some value. It is not as much as it was hyped. It's not as bad as the critics say. It's somewhere in the middle. Voice interfaces are like that. I use my smart speakers mostly to set timers or ask for the temperature. One thing you need to understand is that the peak of inflated expectations are created by people who have a vested interest. Any company in this area will talk about how awesome it is, be it Web3, be it crypto, be it whatever, blockchain, or cryptocurrencies. They'll say they are wonderful and excellent and they'll solve all the problems of the world. They will overhype it because they are betting their technology on that. So they will not say this technology is useless, or they won't say, hey, okay, this technology has some pros and cons. No, they'll say it's awesome because they have a vested interest. And when you need something to be true, you end up believing it and you become a devotee of the thing. And you have all these investors as well who want this to be true. When they've invested money in a company, they'll hype it up. So that is why you have this peak of inflated expectations with crypto. And in fact, that's the reason I made this video. It is not to say that crypto or Bitcoin or whatever is useless. It's definitely not useless. It has some use, just not as much as what people are saying today. At least as of today, right? I am evaluating the technology as it stands today. 5 years from now, 3 years from now, if some of these flaws are fixed, then the technology may have more value than it has today. But when you are buying technology, you need to, as a consumer, you need to evaluate it based on what it does today. So if you're buying an electric scooter, you should buy it based on what it does today. Right? The company may say, oh yeah, 3 months later we'll push out a software update, it'll do all these wonderful things. You shouldn't buy the scooter based on all these claims. You should buy it based on what it does today. And the same goes for Bitcoin or crypto or Web3 as a consumer. However, if you're a builder, if you're building a startup in this area, you want to build a product, or you're an investor, you have to get in early. You can't wait till the kinks are worked out, because then it will be too late. There is this beautiful quote or mantra. It's called huge if true. Oh, it has been kind of messed up into a meme. But anyway, I think it comes from Andreessen Horowitz, or one of these big investors. And that is how they evaluate technology. If it is true, how big will it be? So they are betting on the option. They are buying optionality. That is the perspective of an investor or an entrepreneur. So if you are one of those, don't let the criticisms in this video hold you back. Yes, there are problems. That is why there is a need for you to go and solve these problems. If there weren't problems, there wouldn't be a need for you to solve them, and there wouldn't be a need for your project or product or company or investment. But if you are a consumer, if you are a user, then Ask hard questions. Ask, what does this technology do? Look at it with a skeptical eye. Ask, can I get this outcome in some other way, like using TransferWise instead of Bitcoin? So that is the difference of perspective between a builder or an entrepreneur or an investor and a consumer. Consumer should adopt technology once it's ready. And this technology is not ready today. And who knows how the future will be? Let's keep an open mind. If it works out as well as the enthusiasts claim, great. We get to benefit from it. If not, since I haven't invested, I won't lose.